Hello, my name is Kieran Dolan. This is going to be a really interesting video, so I really hope you like it. And let's just hop in, right? Two things I want you to check here. Kanye West, Red Room, Ghost Town. If you look that up on YouTube, you'll see a beautiful 6-minute video. It's a song, but there's also a bit of a lecture at the end. That's really this beautiful expression of freedom. And another thing that's particularly relevant to me is Logic. If you look up 5 Hooks by Logic, it's a song. And it's basically his kind of capability here. And the next thing I want to express that isn't really associated with those two songs necessarily. If you look at the beginning of the Logic song, yes, it is. There's also this lecture by Earl Nightingale called The Strangest Secret. It's very popular, and if you really hear it, you'll probably say, oh yeah, I might have heard that before, you know. But it's really critical that you actually take it seriously, right? You know, there's also biblical quotations in The Strangest Secret, but also check the Bible, right? I mean, there's so much in there that's just fantastic. Another thing I want to just suggest out there to other projects, right, where this links to other projects, if you use the I, you, me, we, my, right, it actually is a general term, right? It's a pronoun. So it's actually not talking about me, right, or you, right? It's talking about the general me, right, and the general you, and the general we that comes together. This character of relational connection, right? Because even if I say that you're distinct from me, you're actually still connected by your distinction, right? If that makes any sense. So anyways, just start there. And then we can move to the second point, is that in Earl Nightingale, they talk about you are what you think about, right? But what Logic discusses, and I think in some real capacity, the God power is this capacity in the world, right? In the actual world, where what Logic does is he's created this world out of story, right? And so by communicating this story, he basically allows you to experience this world to some extent. He's trying to help you experience it, right? And that's basically what in my opinion, this kind of peak music experience is pulling you into this story and taking you through this story, and you know, you living that story, right? And you know, actually experiencing the story, right? And you can connect that to your outside life, right? Outside of that little story. That world, though, it's a whole world, very fleshed out, right, from all angles, and it's this kind of unified character, right? Because it's one story. So that's interesting. Another thing to mention here, and this is almost where it comes from, right? We live life, you know, there's this analogy that if your life is a journey, right, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? It's almost like a dance, right? You're dancing in the world. But one thing that we recognize with dancing is that it's actually put to music, right? It's very hard to dance without someone helping you time it, right? Especially if you're doing it with other people. It's very difficult to do it without timing it. Even if that means you're, you know, scatting with your mouth and just making your own beat, right? Even without that, it's very difficult. And so we dance to music, right? And we do live life to some type of spiritual music, right? In the soul, let's say. And now music is naturally an analogy. I think light is almost a more kind of applicable analogy, but you know, the idea of seeing, right? The analogy of seeing is a much, I think, very misunderstood, right? Because you actually do see, but to suggest that you dance, you know, you probably dance quite badly, right? Practically speaking, statistically, and I dance terribly, but even still, right? You know you dance badly, but you don't know that you see badly, right? I mean, I actually wear glasses. I know that my vision is not very good, so I have corrective lenses, let's say. But, you know, I know I'm a terrible dancer. But even if I'm not a terrible, even if I am a terrible dancer, I know that I need music to help me dance, right? Or else I'm just going to be a terrible dancer, right? And so that's critical, right? And you know, I don't technically need light to help me see, right? But we really do. We just don't recognize it because we're so inundated with light. Anyways, so I'm going to use the dance analogy, right, and the music analogy because it's easy to understand. And so we sing a song, basically, and we live our life dancing, but there's the idea of living life and just being alive, right? A tree communicates its treeness by saying, I'm a tree, I'm a tree, I'm a tree. And it is a tree, right? And if you really recognize the tree, as it's telling you I'm a tree, then, you know, the tree exists and the tree is realized, you know? And the same with all other inanimate objects, right? Everything really is animate, but under what force, right? That's really the thing you need to recognize to become, you know, adept at with kind of understanding resources, right? We can move things, but, you know, it moves everything else, right? That's a critical thing to remember. So when you're listening to music, right, you can either pay attention to the music, right, and really actually be interested in what it's saying and you know, putting yourself toward the world that they're bringing you into, right? Just talking about logic here. And of course, Kanye West, the same thing. He made Graduation. I mean, geez, if that's not motivational, I don't know what is. But even still. So the music, you pay attention, you don't pay attention, right? You don't know, you know, that's a tree right there. I can see a tree right in front of me, excuse me. But it's like, that's a tree. I'm a tree, right? And so I know it's a tree, right? And I'm listening to the tree and I know it's a tree. But I could also be like, okay, well, I'm going to use the saw, which is like, I'm a saw, right? And use my will and my sort of, you know, dance, my action, right? The physical movement to change that saw, you know, firstly, it was just rocks, right? It used to be metal ore, right? Then we made it a saw, and now I'm going to use the saw on the tree, right? And so by that kind of notion, it allows, you know, this is the dance of this movement, right? And I think there's this idea of you and me, right? But there is no such thing as a you. Right? There's no such thing as a you. There's only me, right? And it's a different me and another me and another me, right? Because I don't recognize you as any more separate from me than another you, right? So each other you is just as separate from me as I am to the next you, right? And to that end, it's the same way. Right? I mean, of course, there are other yous out there that are let closer to me, such as family, friends, you know, familiars. And so in that capacity, you know, you do recognize that uniqueness, right? And you say, okay, well, I'm a Kieran, right? I'm a Kieran, right? But then there's also the idea that we just humdrum about, right? And we don't actually sort of listen to the music, right? And we just put on whatever music is on, don't pay attention and just kind of let it play. And, you know, we're not even really dancing. We're kind of just, you know, jittering basically in some type of movement that isn't terribly productive, right? And so to that end, we see that there's a lot of people who do this, right? I mean, we're talking 90% of people, right? And I'm no different. I'm struggling myself, right? I'm still not a good dancer, let's say, you know, no doubt about it. But nonetheless, it's worth trying, right? Firstly, but even still, when you're talking about the, you know, the humdrum about, I could tell you, I'm a millionaire. And if I really am a millionaire, right? And I don't have $1,000,000 in my bank account, mind you, right? Then I can go to myself and be like, oh, wait a second. I'm a millionaire, right? But I don't have $1,000,000 in the bank account, right? So I need to do this to get the $1,000,000, right? And if that means I can't get coffee, I can't get this, you change, because if you're a millionaire without $1,000,000, you're not doing very well. So you really got to step it up, you know? And so in that capacity, you're singing this song and dancing to a song that you prescribe, right? But if you don't prescribe that song and you don't prescribe that dance, then you're not going to dance that dance, right? And actually get to that dance of being a millionaire, right? And dancing as a millionaire, right? Instead of, and of course you can say, I'm a millionaire, but then you say, oh, I'm a family man, right? Whatever it is, switch it up a little, change your rhythm. Totally okay, right? But the idea is being purposeful, and Earl Nightingale is exactly that, right? Another thing as well, this is Kanye's Ghost Town in the Red Room, is that if you are dancing to somebody else's music, it's very, very dangerous, right? If you think about the music that's coming out of your, Instagram, right, or your TikTok, it's not the actual the audio music, right? It's the music that you're actually dancing to, physically dancing to, right? And so what really is happening is you're swiping on your phone, right, to get this, oh man, I'm dancing right here. This is my dance. I'm dancing with my finger, right? I mean, that's really what it is, right? And I'm listening to the music of swiping on the thing because it's like a satisfying swipe, right? And of course, this is engineered. It's engineered to keep you attached to the phone, right? So it's clearly communicating this underlying music, and you're dancing to it with your phone, right? So you're dancing to their music, and you're like basically subjecting yourselves to ads, right? And of course, you might get some substance, right? I mean, there's certain resources which are more or less valuable. Even still, it's critical to recognize, right? So it's critical to recognize, but the main thing, right, as well. Well, actually, I will mention this. Kanye West actually takes issue with somebody dancing to someone else's music. He says, how are you going to tell someone else what they should do, right? So if I'm me and I'm looking at you and I'm looking at another you, and one you says to the other you, do this, and the other you says, whatever he says, right? Maybe he's in distress because this isn't the thing that he wanted to do, right? But this dude's telling him, do it, right? So from my perspective, I'm going to say no, right? And say, you can't tell me what to do, and you can't tell another you what to do, right? A different person, right? What to do. Because it's not the prerogative of you to tell another you what to do, unless you've got particular familial connections. But even still, I think you should really raise your children to be, unique characters, let's say. Anyways, that's parenting there. We're not going to get into that, but even still, so just recognize Kanye West, not a huge fan of that. But really the big thing, right? If there's any music that I could give you, right? And Earl Nightingale is on the same wavelength here, is that whatever music you start singing, literally, right? If you literally actually start dancing to the music that you're listening to and recognizing the music you're listening to, right? Yes, of course, to your iTunes, but also the things that you are with, right? If you are going and going into bars, right, and living in bars and drinking every night and spending all your money, you're probably not going to have very much money, right? You're probably going to have a hangover more nights than not, right? Whatever that looks like. And then you're also going to be, smoking, spending money on cigarettes. You're decreasing your health, right? So there's all these different issues with doing this, but it's fine, right? It's your song to sing. And the critical thing is that you're singing the song and you want to be, kind of in harmony with these things, right? And think about really how you place yourself, right? If you sing a song that says, I'm a sober priest and I'm the most righteous, knight in the entire sort of kingdom, and you're basically, elevating yourself and kind of too big for your britches type, which of course, that's okay as well. You're choosing to do that. It's disharmonious with the people in the bar, right? Of course. But if you are like a drunkard, right, and you're drinking and you go to the library, you start stumbling over books, right? Or you go into church and you're smelling like whiskey. You're not going to be the best, the most in tune person with the community, right? So you almost have to sing songs and dance dances as you traverse, right? And if there's some dance or song that you're really passionate about, which I hope you are, right? And this is especially Kanye, when you're walking through particular, places, let's say dancing on a particular dance floor, singing that song too loud can be very disharmonious with the people around you, right? Because it of course, there's certain things like anxieties or self-consciousness, right? Which self-consciousness is really a killer because you don't want to be, how should I put this? Self-consciousness is like saying, instead of saying, I'm a millionaire, it's saying, I'm going to be, right? And so it's actually saying I'm not, right? Oh man, police on me here. So anyways, an interesting idea there. But if there's anything I can suggest, it's be active, right? Listen to that music, dance toward the music that you want to dance toward and make it a purpose to dance toward that. And if you really, question who's going to tell you what to dance for and where am I getting any of my questions, right? Where am I getting any of my questions, firstly, but also where am I going to get my answers from for my questions, which just appear magically? It's so terribly difficult because unless you start looking at particular nature, right? Like actual nature, right? If you look at a tree that has no limit to its growth, if you look at a pine tree, it's this almost beautiful cone like this, super straight thing. And you can see these patterns in the tree and it's like, okay, well, what is this? We're looking at this tree. It's got this massive root at the bottom, right? The trunk of the tree. And then it fans out to receive as much sunlight as it can, right? And to filter as much CO2 out of there as it can to get as much resources as it can. And it's trying its best, right? And so you kind of look at these natural things and you become kind of a Gnostic character in a way, but you also, start kind of being passionate about about nature and all this. And you might ascribe incorrect characteristics to nature, which they don't necessarily have, right? Because a tree's only saying, I'm a tree. And a flower might say, I'm a flower. But a human being and God, especially, right? What are they saying, right? Human beings can change what they're saying any day of the week, any time of the week. And of course, you might say, I'm loyal, right? I'm honest. I'm consistent. This is what I want to do. And this is who I am and how I act. And I'm always going to be like this, right? And that's really valuable in many ways to different companies, different people, family members, right? So that is valuable. Even still, you can still change, right? And I do hope that we change to some extent, right? Still allow for that growth and that movement toward God's kingdom, right? And whatever that means to you, right? You pick whatever your God is. You replace God with your thesis for the maximum potential, let's say. Even still, the God character, right? There's me, you, I, right? This type of thing. Us, them, right? The God character is the character that you are, that when you are listening to the world that Logic has made in his music, right? Logic defines this world, right? It's God in the world, basically, right? There's more in there, right? And of course there has to be, right? Because there's all these different relationships that we see kind of nesting themselves in reality, right? Of course, predator and prey are something that we ascribe to in some ways, right? If we're talking about business, but we're also talking about animals, right? So, there's this kind of reality that stacks on top of each other. And so, recognizing that is critical. But then, how should I put this? The God character is the one outside of all that recognizes that, right? And he also recognizes the movement of the holistic spirit, right? I mean, the Holy Spirit is almost separate, right? But the Holy Spirit is actually very much so integral to everything, right? And if the tree didn't have the Holy Spirit, it wouldn't be able to contain itself as a tree, right? He says, I'm a tree. I'm a separate Holy Spirit. I'm a tree, right? Instead of saying, okay, well, I'm a spirit, but I'm actually not separate from the air around me. So I'm actually just the same as the air, right? I might call myself a tree, but what even is that, right? There's no distinction. So why have the distinction at all? So anyways, that is an interesting thing. But so anyways, be active, right? Follow, frankly, your heart, right? Pray. Praying is like listening to the frequency band of the radio, right? It's good to position yourself and listen to the different, valuable sort of ideas out there, right? Even if you don't like the idea, right? Because you're disharmonious with it, right? Obviously we've discussed it in some pragmatic ways. It's still really wonderful to listen and consider, because if you don't consider, you're out of options, right? And you're forced down this path of saying, I am this, right? Or this is the way things are, right? And if you just say that, or you say, I am not, right? Okay, well, if you're not this, you're basically everything else, right? You're basically, if you say, I am not I'm not a slacker, I'm a good salaryman, right? But if you say, I'm not a slacker, right? You might not be a slacker because you go to Starbucks, and then you go to, Walgreens, and then you go to Michael's, and then you go to Albertsons, right? And so you go to all these different places, and you're not slacking. You're really busy, but it doesn't do anything, right? It's useless action, right? And so, consider that as a real movement, where you say, oh, I'm not a slacker, right? I'm not a slacker. Well, what are you then? Nothing else, right? So take action, be positive, and say, this is who I am, right? This is me, right? And recognize that and realize that. Don't just say, if you say, okay, I'm a millionaire, but you never do anything about it, right? Or you buy gold chains all the time, right? You're actually buying your own chains, right? Kanye says that, which is interesting. In St. Pablo, interesting song as well. You're out of money, right? So you're not a millionaire, right? So you might say, oh, I'm a millionaire, but you're not realizing it, right? So you don't actually, how should I put this? When it comes to your own recognition, you're actually not, you don't realize that you are a millionaire, right? Because you're not a millionaire. You just don't realize that you're, or how should I say this? You don't recognize that you realize that you're not a millionaire, right? You might be something else. Maybe your real position is that you're some type of, 2 Chainz character, right? 50 Cent character, where you're like some thuggy, like, look at me, I'm a big guy, right? I'm a gangster. I deserve the respect because I'm always, on this movement, right? And it's a short movement for what it's worth, right? I hate to be, pessimist there, but the harmony with that song is difficult because it does need movement. It needs the actual movement, right? And so you have to say, I'm actually moving, right, to make that work. But it's, you might not recognize that that's what you're realizing, right? And that makes it very difficult to actually move along the dance floor well, right? It's like a shift in the music, quick shift, right? Something like that. So be honest with yourself, right? Realize who you are and realize that you can change the music that you're dancing to. Right? You can change that music, and invariably, right? Invariably, if you actually realize the music you're listening to and you dance this right way to your position, right? Then you can actually change the world, right? You can actually realize the world into existence. If you've just got one room in your house and you've just got one tiny room, it's very difficult to recognize this, right? But if you see a guy and you say, hey, nice to see you, good morning, right? And every day you say that, and you learn their name maybe, right? And you become friends maybe, right? So this is change. This is actually realizing, like, I am friendly, right? If you say, I am friendly, and this is realizing that I am friendly, right? So I'm realizing, oh yeah, I really am friendly, right? And so that's realizing, this is kind of like this kind of, oh man, I'm making it happen, right? I'm changing the world. So anyways, just be good. Love each other, and listen to those things I mentioned at the beginning. Definitely interesting. I don't know if that was the take, but always a pleasure.